The communists must have brainwashed the pilots into false confessions. But how? The agency is determined to find out.
There was a real fear in the CIA that the communists had ways of doing things, of interrogating people, of making people act against their will, that could be breakthroughs.
To combat the new threat, the CIA launches its own intense quest to master the art of mind control.
They were looking for ways to manipulate and control human behavior. They looked at chemical substances. They looked at things like electroshock.
One drug in particular catches their attention: lysergic acid dithylamide, LSD.
The hope was you could use these drugs to soften up somebody for interrogation, or you could use them offensively for mind control programming and getting somebody set up for operations.
10 years before its recreational heyday, LSD becomes the focus of the CIA's quest for the perfect truth drug. There's just one technical hitch: how to find suitable subjects.
One CIA guy said to me, we couldn't really test on housewives in Northern Virginia. That wouldn't have been okay. So they found street people, they found prostitutes, they found prisoners, they found minorities to whom the CIA at the time did not put as much value on their lives as other people.
At the Federal Addiction Research Center in Lexington, Kentucky, Dr. Harris Isbell is contracted by the CIA to study the effects of prolonged exposure to LSD. His subjects are incarcerated heroin addicts, mostly African American.
The deal down there was unbelievably gauche. They had prisoner volunteers who came in, and they would be given LSD as part of the experimentation, and then as a reward given heroin.
In one experiment, prisoners are kept on increasing doses of LSD for 77 straight days. Dr. Isbell called it the most amazing demonstration of drug tolerance he had ever seen.
A lot of these things just violate any kind of common sense and basic medical ethics. That you would think it would be impossible that doctors would do experiments on drug addicts, giving them hallucinogens, and then as a reward for participation, they would get more drugs of addiction. But these things actually happen. They're absolutely documented.
Institutions throughout the United States sign up for CIA research, patriotically serving their country in the fight against communism. While the CIA explores the effects of LSD on the individual, the Army extends its own research to turning on entire battalions. This experiment with hallucinogenic drugs was filmed at Edgewood Arsenal in the 50s.
They were given LSD and they were given orders to march in formation, and instead of staying in formation, they wandered off in different directions or laughing and joking, totally disorganized. Well, the Army had been looking for a drug that could incapacitate the enemy for short periods without killing them, and LSD initially looked like it might be useful for that purpose.
These tests use military volunteers who know they are taking a drug. The CIA has a different mission in mind: to test the drugs covertly.
You might give it to a Russian diplomat at a cocktail party, and you wanted to see how he'd react. Could you recruit him after he'd been given LSD? So unwitting testing was the name of the game.
The CIA establishes safe houses in Manhattan and San Francisco. They enlist prostitutes to lure in possible suspects and slip them LSD. Local gangsters are used to simulate enemy agents with secrets to share. The agency listens in, hoping the lethal combination of the girl and drugs will get the man to talk. Narcotics agent Ira Feldman is responsible for finding those unwitting subjects.
We got prostitutes to come in and speak to these guys, and these prostitutes would put something, which I found out later on was LSD, into the drink and make them talk. and 10 or 15 minutes later, they'd be spilling their guts, whether it be state secrets or narcotics or murder.
But at the height of the Cold War, interrogating domestic gangsters is just a practice run. The real challenge lies in field operations overseas, on the fringe of the Iron Curtain.
Western and Eastern Europe were the front lines of the struggle against communism. So if a defector came in and they wanted to try a new substance on them, they would send in American intelligence people.
In occupied Germany, the CIA hones its techniques for getting at the truth. The potential victims for interrogation are endless. Defecting scientists with valuable information to share. Suspected double agents selling secrets to the communists. All are fair game for the CIA.
A person would be taken to a safe house in a secure location. They would be kept there for a period of at least days. They might have sleep and food deprivation. They would have possibly alcohol, barbiturates, hallucinogens, and other medications administered, and then a variety of interrogation techniques would be applied.
In order to fully test these techniques, the agency must pursue the interrogations to the bitter end.
There was an expression the CIA was using called terminal experiments, which were experiments that would lead to death or vast injury to the person.
Among those who witnessed these experiments is Fort Detrick scientist Frank Olson. His passport shows several trips to Germany, including summer 1953. He is deeply disturbed by what he sees. On his way home through England, Olson visits once more with intelligence consultant William Sargent.
To quote what Sargent told me, Frank was very different when he came back that time. He was quite aroused, in a sense, angry, upset.
William Sargent is convinced the CIA now has a serious problem. Its Cold War secrets are no longer safe in the hands of Frank Olson.
So by the time Olson was on a plane out of RAF Northolt on the way home to Washington, Sargent has called his controller at MI6 and said, "We have a problem."
That information would have gone up the chain and it would have eventually reached Washington.
Alice Olson notices a definite change in her husband upon his return.
That last summer when my father came back, my mother said that she knew he was very upset.
Olson's likely witnessed top-secret experiments that few within the CIA even know about.
Frank Olson had an incredible storehouse of knowledge about top secret matters concerning biological weapons and substances. And as such, he would have been a person who there would have been great concern if he had started to talk publicly.
As head of mind control research, Sidney Gottlieb is the one man who knows the full extent of Olson's knowledge. If Olson's been sharing state secrets, Gottlieb needs to know. He decides to conduct a little experiment of his own. Deep Creek Lodge in Maryland, Wednesday, November 18th, 1953. Frank Olson and 6 colleagues from Special Operations at Fort Detrick attend a clandestine meeting. They are joined by counterparts from the CIA, including Sidney Gottlieb and his deputy, Robert Lashbrook.
The invitation, which for some amazing reason we still have, it described the cover story, which was this was a bunch of wildlife journalists who were meeting in the woods to discuss wildlife journalism.
According to CIA documents, after dinner on Thursday night, Gottlieb slips a small amount of LSD into a bottle of Cointreau.
So according to Gottlieb, when I met him, they were concerned that what if a scientist was kidnapped by the communists, and what if the enemy drugged that scientist, would he be forthcoming? And they were going to test this by staging a scientific meeting and drugging the participants. And that my father was just one of a number who got this drug.
Allegedly, all but 2 of the scientists present are drugged unwittingly. 20 minutes later, Gottlieb tells them what he's done, and the meeting gradually deteriorates as the narcotic takes effect. But what happens after that remains disputed. Some believe Olson is interrogated. When Olson returns home, he is profoundly affected.
He wasn't hallucinating or anything remotely like that. He was simply somber and was upset. He used that phrase that he'd made a terrible mistake and he had decided he wanted to quit his job.
Instead of accepting Olson's resignation, his boss sends him to New York for psychiatric counseling. He's accompanied by Robert Lashbrook from the CIA. But the attending doctor, Harold Abramson, is not a psychiatrist, but an allergist. He's been experimenting with LSD for the CIA's mind control research. The doctor's notes show several meetings with Olson over the course of the week. On the Friday evening, Olson calls home to his wife, Alice.
He said he was feeling much better. He just wanted to reassure her and said he'd, look forward to seeing her the next day.
But at 2 o'clock on Saturday morning, Frank Olson falls from the 13th floor of the hotel to the sidewalk below. The CIA claims it's suicide. They offer no explanation to the family, but secretly conclude it was triggered by the LSD given 9 days previously. But something even more sinister could be at play. According to the night manager, immediately after Olson's death, the hotel operator hears Lashbrook calling Dr. Abramson.
And he said, well, he's gone. And the man on the other end said, well, that's too bad. And they both hung up.
The conversation is suspiciously brief. An unexpected suicide of Abramson's patient would usually warrant more lengthy discussion.
I don't believe you'll ever hear of a case where anybody who was committing suicide jumped through a closed window. I think he was trying to tell me that somebody threw me out the damn window.
Whether murder or suicide, if William Sargent was right and Frank Olson was a security threat to the agency, his death silences him forever. The secrets of the CIA's experiments remain safe for now. After the Korean War, disturbing new intelligence reaches Washington. Hundreds of American troops are still being held captive, subjected to brainwashing experiments, and then killed. Mind control research back home intensifies. The new goal is to cause an individual to become subservient to an imposed control, to the point where he will perform acts against his will and then have no memory of the act. The search for a real-life Manchurian candidate begins. In the Hollywood classic directed by John Frankenheimer, a hypnotized soldier is programmed to assassinate a presidential candidate. Like a clip from the movie, the CIA attempts to create its own Manchurian assassins using hypnosis and drugs.
You create this new identity inside that's hidden from the main part of the person by an amnesia barrier. And then using an access code, you can call out this new identity for whatever mission purpose.
To produce such an assassin, the CIA faces 2 main challenges: how to induce amnesia and how to program in new behavior. In 1957, Dr. Ewan Cameron, an eminent psychiatrist in Montreal, believes he has the answers.
The agency sought him out because they had noticed his work, in particular with 2 techniques, intensive electroshock and what he called psychic driving.
Cameron applies his techniques under the guise of normal therapy.
It's hard to say just how awful and horrendous what Cameron proposed and what our government financed was. It was a three-part technique which started with an effort to wipe out past patterns of behavior. And this was accomplished through the use of particularly intensive, repeated, high-level electroshocks until no more convulsions could be elicited from a patient.